All right, just a quick reminder that we will be starting in about 1 minute. We've already got well over 150 people who've joined in, and so there'll be quite a few live on this particular webinar. So we just want to make sure we have plenty of time to get everybody in so they don't miss anything, because the whole thing will be good. So about another 30 seconds and then we'll get rolling. As people start trickling in right now, what I want to quickly do is just welcome everyone to this particular webinar and everything you're going to want to know, at least right now, on how to train women and what women's training is all about. So before we jump into the webinar itself, I just want to make sure you guys are aware. Most of you will probably be on a computer and or a cell phone. There's usually a control panel on your computer or even the cell phone that will have various tabs to it. The two tabs that will be most important for you is we're going to be, one, having polls. So we're going to have a couple of questions that we want to ask just to get some information from you so we can direct this webinar to you. There's also a questions tab. You are free to ask questions, and we strongly suggest that you do. What we will do is try to answer the ones that are pertinent to the conversation at that time. I'll be monitoring the questions while Rachel Knox, who's our guest speaker and master educator for Eleiko, she's going to be giving you all the expertise and information. I'll monitor that, and so I'll interrupt if need be to detail or have her answer one of the questions for you guys. But we will try to reserve time at the end to answer as many questions as possible. So feel free to write questions and type them in. I'm going to try to sort through them as best as possible and get to the ones that are pertinent now, and then try to answer as many as we can later on. So the other things that we'll be doing is, well, no, we don't have. We have the polls and we have the questions, and that's all you'll need to know. So if you want to type in a question, just go to the question tab, type that in, and we'll respond. Okay, that said, as I mentioned, we're going to start this webinar. Rachel Knox is our master educator. She's in Dubai right now, and I'm going to kind of turn this over to her. She is a fantastic lifter, and so what she's going to speak from is experience and a lot of education. I'm going to let her give herself a little introduction, and then from there we'll jump into the actual webinar. So sit back and enjoy.
Thanks, Rodney. I think that's why it's dark on my screen, because it's nighttime here in Dubai, but then light, I guess, for most of you if you're in the US. So it'd be interesting to know where everybody is from right now as well. But so I wanted to start with a little bit of a background on myself as well, just so you know where I'm coming from a sports perspective and from training women. That's why we're here today. Like, I've been playing sport my whole life, and that might be from athletics to snowboarding and horse riding, but it wasn't until around I was 20 that I started to lift weights. Then initially I'd started training CrossFit and competed within the sport, and that's mostly as an individual, and then that had brought me over to Olympic weightlifting, where I competed at a national level on the Scottish team, but in Britain and in the UK. But during that time, and while I was at my most competitive, I tore my ACL. So whole journey. Now I wanted to explain this first, because from a performance perspective, lifting weights optimally then changed every other sport that I was involved in. Like, my level excelled without practicing the sport, even though I've been playing sport my whole life, and my personal confidence then grew. But my injury led me to dive into the nuances of why it had actually happened, and initially found out that was probably because I was following the same progressions as all of my male training partners at the time, and there wasn't much evidence-backed protocols for women on how to recover or how to train. So from then, for the following now 15 years, I've been coaching women to kind of do the same. And from there, I believe strength training is something that is essential and not just optimal for well-being and for your life, to be able to thrive and be capable, whatever sport you then choose what you want to do. So now I'm currently based in Dubai. I've worked with women across the UK, like I'm originally from the UK, and then also across Asia and in Hong Kong, where in both cities I was actually brought over to launch women-only training facilities. So I'm not only trying to perform at my most optimal, but I want to ensure women have the tools to also be able to do so, and promote women's strength training. I know it's come very far since I first started. There's not so much stigma about women being in the gym. It's much more across social media. There has been some studies, but not then at length. So I think we're going to find out where everybody's from, or we'll dive straight in.
Yeah, let's go. So thank you for that, Rachel. And what we're going to do is we want to get a little bit of feedback from who you guys are. So we're going to run just a couple of polls real fast. So the first one that we would like to know is this your first Eleiko Strength Talk, yes or no? So if you can just punch that in for us, we deeply appreciate. So fantastic. We've got about a 70-30 split of newcomers. So this is your first one. So this is going to be a great one for you to experience kind of the Eleiko way and how we like to do things here. So thank you for that. So there was a total of 73 yeses and 23 nos. So we have 27. So we have some repeat ones, but we got a lot of new ones. So fantastic. Thank you guys very much for that. Okay. Now let's go to the next poll. Let me close this out. All right, closing out that poll. And we're going to go to, just want to know who we have on here. How many females, how many males? If you guys want to jump in and give us feedback on how many we have of each one. Fantastic. So it's about a 60-40 split, female to male. So guys, deeply appreciative that you joined in, because this is a vitally important topic. And as always, women, thank you for being part of this, because this is extremely important, as Rachel's already shared with you. Okay, so we've got 60-40 there. And the last one is, which of the following will best describe who you are, what you do? Strength coach, trainer, athlete, fitness enthusiast, owner, operator, licensed professional. Beautiful. So Rachel, we have about a 60-40 split with the strength coach trainers and the athlete fitness enthusiasts. We do have some owner operators. We do have some licensed professionals. And I'm assuming licensed professionals, that means that you guys are either a physio, a chiro, massage therapist, something of that nature. If it's something different, please jump in the question tab and just type in what you are, and that way it'll give me an idea of kind of who we have. Okay, that said, we are ready to roll. Rachel, it's all you. So when we start talking about this, Rachel, the question that I think a lot of people will have, and I know that I have, is how is women's strength training different? Because I think a lot of times it's looked at as being men's training, only lighter, kind of as you alluded to, what you were doing when you got injured. So can you kind of fill us in on what that's all about?
I think this is the major one, and obviously the very good point to be able to start at, and very good to see that there's 40% of men who are interested in this and want to possibly train clients a little bit differently or understand that, so they don't come to the same mishaps as that I had over my time. But like, I think we've all heard the term "women are not small men" that has been floating around a lot recently. But why is that? It's like due to a number of reasons, and mostly physiological differences, probably between muscle mass distribution, different hormonal factors, how we can recover in different ways. Like, we're built differently for a reason. If you put a man and a woman standing next to each other, you can clearly see it, but it's just how we've also evolved over time. Like, women have more muscle mass laxity due to be able to grow and change the hormonal factors and to being able to develop tissue, obviously when it comes to pregnancy as well. And then the menstrual cycle and menopause affect performance. And in no means that can't be utilized as power at the same time when it's understood. It just needs to be understood to begin with. So if we think about that as we're looking at movement patterns, the same foundation applies for both men and women, which is like a squat, hinge, push, pull, and carry. Like women benefit from the same kind of primal movement patterns, but it's where biomechanics matter and they differ. So if you were thinking about a man and woman standing next to each other, women often have a much wider pelvis. That's obviously to then be able to give birth. So it means that the Q angle, which from their hip going down to their knee joint, will be greater, which gives the knee valgus, which is the knee moving in, a lot higher risk when you're squatting or jumping. And again, going back to it, that's what happened with myself. So the emphasis on movement patterns for a female over a male would be looking at knee tracking, making sure it's stable, hip stability, and then glute activation at the same time. Other big biomechanical differences would be upper body pressing and pulling, because you may feel it just a lot more challenging relative to the lower body, just because of natural strength distribution. So then we should include more vertical and horizontal pulling, again, as a primal movement pattern, because it's not just naturally ingrained. So
That's
then,
great.
Once you have then looked at movement patterns there, we'll go on to just discuss volume tolerance, because it would be very different for men and women. And I think a lot of people will find this surprising, but women actually generally have a higher fatigue resistance and faster recovery than our male counterparts. So we can work closer to our 1 rep max range. Like we can handle more reps at a given percentage closer to our 1 rep max.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. And to that point, I remember years ago, I was fortunate enough to train an Olympic pole vaulter, and she was one of the 2 or 3 US pole vaulters back in 2002. And she was by far one of the most phenomenal athletes that I've ever worked with. And I've worked with some professional athletes, both football, basketball, and it was amazing to see, to support what Rachel was just saying. It was amazing to see how intense she was able to train relative to the guys who were at a very same level. They were all elite athletes, but the difference in how she was able to kind of consistently stay at a different intensity without breaking down. Now, that doesn't mean she didn't have to recover, doesn't mean she wasn't doing stuff, but it was how she was able to recover and how she was able to sustain that. That was extremely impressive, and to this day, by far one of the most amazing athletes that I've ever worked with, or people. Rachel, on that note, how does equipment differ? Because we know that there's biomechanical differences. How does equipment differ? Like I know, for example, at Eleiko, we have, there's women's bars, there's men's bars, there's different things. How does that matter, and how is that important?
That actually matters greatly. I think when you enter a gym, and it'll still be in a lot of gyms actually, when you go to the dumbbell section and they have huge handles on there, they still haven't really changed into a smaller handle. But obviously our grip is a lot smaller, our hands are a lot smaller. So not just then from dumbbells, when we're looking at a barbell, the standard men's bar is around 28 millimeters, and that's a 20 kilo bar. Obviously a lot longer as well, because your arm length will differ. The women's bar at 15 kilos, it doesn't have to just be a women's bar, but a training bar or anyone with smaller hands as well, is about 25 millimeters. Now, when you have a smaller shaft, it makes it easier for you to be able to grip securely, and that improves your technique and reduces the injury risk. Also just gives you a better relationship with what you're being able to do, and more confidence comes into play. If you look at a barbell there, if you can grip securely, you've got better pull mechanics, meaning you can keep the barbell a little bit closer. Your Olympic lifts are going to be better. Whereas if you're using a bigger bar, it's going to start to move away from your body and you don't have as much control. Again, that can go into so many different factors where you're not optimally going to be able to build strength and you're at the risk of injury. Also, the correct bar path just teaches you better biomechanics over time. It reduces the stress on your joints, it improves its efficiency, and it makes heavy training more accessible for women, and then not just men. So now we are seeing different size dumbbells in gyms. We're also seeing better barbells in gyms as well. But I think when you then walk in and see these, you also think, I belong here, I'm supposed to be here. Strength training is also for me as a female. It just makes the space also a lot more inclusive.
And to that point, Rachel, you mentioned technique, and we talked a lot about mechanics. How does that technique kind of help in improving technique and using the equipment to do so, even in many cases? How does that improve confidence or help with confidence, which I think is vitally important?
Oh, for sure. I think that also comes with, you have a good neurological connection to what you're being able to do. If you can then move something efficiently and well, your body actually does respond to that so much better. You have a positive connection to something that you've then gone and done, which means you're going to want to do it again. And then you're going to optimally build strength that way because you're coming back at the same time. And I think that's really important to be able to have those tools if you have clients that you want to be able to teach and have a positive connection to that.
Yep. What are some of the functional benefits? Because we've talked on mechanics, and we've talked about that proper equipment can help build better mechanics or help foster better mechanics. That in itself can help build confidence, which is a huge mental boost. What are some of the other functional benefits that women can get from strength training?
I think we've got a few points that we can dive into a little bit here. Because again, strength training is essential. It's not an optional thing to be able to do. If you look at functionality and you're going out into the world and you just want to present yourself as confident as well, it comes into your posture and your stability, like being able to strengthen your posterior chain, combat your desk posture, supports healthy movement at the same time. And this is functional training to support longevity over time. It'll increase your bone density, so essential for reducing osteoporosis risk and help with injury prevention. Like the real world carryover to that would be just better performance and reduced injury risk. Nobody wants to try and pick up their kid and then their back hurts. So you need to be able to move for life at the same time. When we look at it from women's training in specifics, like that goes over to motherhood and being able to recover from pregnancy at the same time, being able to move with ease, being able to strengthen and lift and carry, and giving you that independence as you age. So you're aging strong and not fragile.
Yeah, and I think that's important because women typically have a longer lifespan than men. And I think to your point, Rachel, with that, we'd like to have a longer play span. So your ability to do the things that you enjoy longer, not just live longer, but live in a wheelchair longer. So if you outlive your partner, you outlive the the love of your life or whatever, there's a play span that's involved with that. You have the ability to do that. And that's where it sounds like the mental and the physical become so vitally important, especially as we age, because we're always talking about longevity. I know that's a buzzword right now. Everyone jumps on the longevity bandwagon, but longevity doesn't start when you get old. It starts when you get young. So.
Sure, and I think we're seeing that so much. We're seeing that so much more now. I wish that was there 15 years ago when I started training, but I think we have we've been the test puppets for that, I think, and I'm also kind of happy to do so, that I can learn from what I've been through and help other people in those ways to make sure they're strong enough to move forward. Like, I think we've debunked a lot of the myths that are around strength training now. Like, the main one would be, if you're going to strength train or lift weights as a woman, then you'll get bulky. Where I think, but what is the reason for that? Because it's not actually going to happen. Like, women have 10 to 15 times lesser testosterone levels than men. So it's very, very difficult to then build large muscle mass for women specifically.
Excellent. So I'm just looking at some questions real quick. So there's been a few questions that came in, and for Michael Thomas, what are the primary movement patterns one should include in assessing women, for assessment women? I mean, I think you kind of touched on that, but what are some of the primary movement patterns that you'd want to do?
You would very much test the same. I think it's squat, hinge, push, pull, and carry. The testing elements will be the same, but obviously the output is going to be very different. For example, our grip strength is lesser. We probably won't be able to hold on for as long as a man is able to, but doesn't mean we're not able to build that up. It just gives you a good direction and a good starting point, still with the same kind of overall screening test. There's definitely more movement patterns that we want to hone in on to make sure they're stronger, which again, we go back to what we were talking about before about posterior chain and hip strength, just because the way our hip sits to our knee isn't going to be in a straight line. So you're looking at assessing a little bit more like knee stability, hip stability there within a female.
Yeah, and to add to that, one of the things too, besides just movement testing, we also, so one of the things that we do in our readiness and recovery training courses, we talk about activation and muscle activation, because you can be strong, but your muscles don't turn on subconsciously on demand. When that happens, we lack joint stability. So one of the things that we do in our course is we show people how to reactivate or basically reboot musculature, because what we don't realize is that muscles don't automatically work the way we think they do all of the time, because inflammation, stress inflammation primarily, actually shuts down sensory receptors in the muscle that decreases its ability to fire on demand. So one of the things that we have to also look at is, while movement patterns are great and they won't actually show you what is specifically not turning on when it's supposed to. So we can help create activation in those. There's also a process that we've talked about. We had a webinar last year with Greg Roscoff and muscle activation techniques, and he has a process called Jumpstart that we use, that I've gone through and that we've used in component, and we're in conjunction with them, where you're able to do muscle testing. Now, we don't teach that, he does, but you're able to muscle test, so you can find out what's working and what's not working. So if you're a licensed professional or you've gone through his process, Greg Roscoff's process of muscle activation technique, you can actually ensure that things are turning on the way they're supposed to. And so those are other things that we promote besides just movement, because movement won't tell you what's not working. It just shows you something's not working. We assume things, but that's an assumption. That's not always correct. So That was a good question. Thank you for that.
When we want to touch on the muscle activations a little bit more, women tend to not be able to feel their hamstrings as much as men. So that's where, to begin with, when you're starting to strength train with women, I think it's better to use something like a trap bar or a guide that is going to get them to initiate the feeling of their hamstrings or their glutes as well, just because, again, we're probably more flexible. We have that muscle elasticity, so you'll usually see that women are more mobile than men, just as a broad stereotype. But it does mean that it's harder for us to engage our hamstrings, or at least feel them. So it is a good point to be able to look at first.
So Rachel had a question about how to start strength training in menopause with 2 to 3 weekly sessions. Is barbell best? Is there like a quick kind of blurb on if someone's in menopause, what they should do?
If you haven't been strength training before as well, look at those primal movement patterns again, but the goal is just to be able to slow everything down. I think it's like a beginner again, but if you're working at the tempo, you're connecting your mind and your muscles at the same time, and that's going to be the most important thing as your body and your hormones are very much changing. You don't want to be doing too much for speed or intensity. It's more about stability and control. So you're controlling, again, your muscles as they're changing and your hormones as they're changing. So I would start with 2 to 3 times a week. You would be right there. But again, possibly guided by somebody.
Yeah, that's a great start. And then also something that maybe we'll touch on in a little bit, but the recovery becomes very important because you're not going to have the same hormonal balance that you did as when you were younger. And with a different hormonal balance, there is a different recovery process that goes on with the tissues. So those are all things that I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but those are other things that we have to be aware of. What are the most common mistakes made in women training caused by lack of knowledge, things that we don't think? What do you feel is the most common mistakes? I mean, we've touched on a lot of different things to this point.
Again, I think that's moving at high intensity without being in control of your body to begin with, which could be male and female, but mostly we see that in females. And I think actually COVID would put a shine on that at the time because everybody was at home doing home workouts and they were jumping around doing jump squats and jump lunges, where then again, to what we referred to before, we need to work on a lot more knee stability and hip stability. So when you just increase intensity and start jumping without the control, that's where we'll see most of the injuries. I think women respond very well to small wins. So I think that's why HIIT classes took off so well. It gives you that kick of endorphins and endorphin rush. But to stop that, I think it's just changing the mindset towards why am I doing this? Like what is the purpose of this? And that will be able to keep you going instead of trying to chase the rush and reduce the risk of injury.
Excellent. Another question, I think it's a good question. Michael Duncan asked, Rachel, I'm a general fitness facility operator. What's your thoughts on women only areas in a gym?
It depends where you are, I guess. But that can really make the community thrive. It's not intimidating for women to be able to walk into, and other women are then lifting weights. I think I've been in Dubai for the past 9 years, so we have a lot of women's only training facilities here, and I actually went from coaching men and women to solely coaching women because I love the energy that they then give as a whole. I think they're very supportive. There's no chance of there being ego in the room. So they will listen to the coach that's there. The biggest recommendation that I would have is just to have a very good female coach that also understands what they're doing if it's in that space.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think another one, Erin Heiser, and we can tap into this because it'll bring out some things that we haven't talked about, or maybe we can get to. But Erwin has asked how to get women over their fear of weight training. It looks like all marketing messaging for women is geared around Pilates and yoga. And that might tie into, I don't want to get big.
Yeah, I don't want to get bulky. I wonder what area you're in as well. But I think that's changing the mindset to what you're actually training for. Are you training for the rest of your life? Or are you training for right now as well? Like, unless your goal is to get big and bulky, they are not going to get big and bulky. And I think there is a lot of marketing around that at the same time, but the most important thing is to then focus on longevity, because I think for women, they want to be there for their families as well. They want to be able to support people for as long as possible. So focusing on that element and how that's going to help them with their confidence and have a better quality of life is what you would target.
Yeah, and I think it's the messaging, there is messaging come around. It depends again on where you are, but we have to realize the value and the importance of muscle tissue. And as your muscle tissue health goes, so goes the health of the body, because it's intimately connected and influences every other tissue in the body, from brain to fat to organs, everything. So when we train, if getting bulky was so easy, everyone would be bulky. Think of men who have more testosterone, typically than women. If getting bulky, all he had to do is go in the gym and just lift, then everyone would be bulky, and that's not the case. It's so difficult for many people because there's many factors that go into it. You actually have to train and adapt your acute variables in order to gain size, and it's not just the weight training itself. Then it goes into the nutrition, because you have to fuel that with excessive calorie intake so the body is able to put weight on. So this is where, unfortunately, the marketing and messaging is incomplete in many points, because there's a lot that goes into getting big, or that strength training is bad or it's going to hurt you. It's actually going to help you when done properly. And to Rachel's point, if you find someone that has the ability to guide you, that makes this journey far simpler. And the fear is because there's an unknown and because of what we've seen. But if you were to sit down and discuss with the person, find out what's the fear, why are they afraid, what are they afraid of, because there's different things. It could be the fact that the gym doesn't have a women's only situation. It could be the fact that the gym is predominantly male and they're women. It'd be the fact that they're brand new, because men coming into a gym that have never trained before, it's very intimidating. So there's all these factors that I think we have to ascertain first. We have to figure out what's the actual cause of the fear, and then from there we can disseminate it. But again, it goes back to what Rachel said. This is about longevity and about health. So
yeah, but it's so important to have knowledgeable staff or trainers or coaches in the facility, because they also know how to speak to other women, like woman to woman. Then they can connect with them in a different way, to make them feel a little bit more safe and secure to what they're doing. But I think it's changing the narrative very much, that strength training doesn't make women bulky. It actually makes them very capable. Like, the real shift is in redefining strength as health, resilience, and confidence, and not just as muscle size.
another question I think that is a good point here, Rachel, that may lead into some other things. It's that, as you told, women can tolerate more volume and intensity. And let me clear up one thing with that. It's not that women can tolerate more volume and intensity than men, because men can tolerate a lot of volume and intensity. It's the ability of the women to sometimes recover from that depending on where they are. So there's a lot of neurophysiology that goes into the female versus male kind of recovery. Women require, in general, more sleep than men. They have the ability to recover differently than men. And because of some of the processes that work within them, which this particular course isn't about right now for the webinars, we want to get to a broader spectrum. So don't feel like men aren't as capable of training as women, and or vice versa. They both have abilities. It's just that women have a different, in general, not every woman, but in general, women have a different ability for training at a certain intensity a little bit longer, and there's research behind that to do that.
Yeah.
So it's not that men can't, it's that women do that. But with this one, Rachel, and I'll let you go with it. But with the menstruation, you think that it needs to be adjusted around that time of the month. So this is specifically during the menstruation cycle, the whole volume intensity thing. How do you feel about that? Does that need to be adjusted?
I think, yes, it definitely needs to be adjusted, but also everybody is very different. And this comes from just 15 years of conversations with people and with friends and other people who train. I respond very differently to somebody else who is in their luteal phase, for example, on how I can perform. But then again, it's just getting to know your body. The best way to be able to adjust your training there, I think, is when you're looking at your training program, I would always use a base of RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion. So if you look at that on a scale of 1 to 10, your effort of 7 out of 10 one week will look very different to your effort out of 7 out of 10 the next week. So especially when it comes to a female, then if you adjust that week by week, you're still getting progress because your body is just reacting to the stimulus and it doesn't know the weight that's on the bar. So if you can follow a program that way, you're still actually progressing and giving your body linear progression than forcing it through heavier weights and heavier loads. So I think if you can adjust in your training program by knowing yourself, or getting your clients to really adapt to how they know themselves, then that's where you'll see the progress, and you don't have to change too much per se.
Good. I was just reading through some of the questions. This is one that we can touch on because we have plenty of time, and then we'll get to kind of the final thing. Is I'm a 47-year-old mother of 3. My male online coach says strength training is the same for men and women. Muscle is muscle. From your perspective, what is the most important difference women like me should consider, especially in midlife?
It's when you've started training as well. I think I would find a female coach.
I'll jump in a tad on this because this is interesting. So first off, muscle is muscle, but it's in two different generalized systems. There are different hormones that we're talking about. So while muscle tissue is muscle tissue, that can change between men and between women. So it's not just the muscle that has to do the work. The nervous system has to do the work. Then there's hormonal factors that come into how this works. There's recovery factors that come into this. There's all these variables. So while muscle tissue is muscle tissue, how it actually operates and functions can be different within a gender or between genders. So we know that females in general have a different hormonal profile, have a different capacity than men. It does not mean that they can't grow, they can't get larger, they can't get stronger, they can't get fat. That doesn't mean, but how that happens is slightly different. So everyone, the premise behind all of this is that women are uniquely different, but everybody is uniquely different and needs to find out what works best for you. How I train as a man may not work for how other people train as a man, and vice versa. How Rachel trains as a woman may not work for other people or other women who train, and vice versa. So there's individualization. So to say that muscle is muscle and just go train it, that is understandable, but I would respectfully disagree that that's incomplete, because it's not just muscle that you're training, it's the whole system that the muscle is within. So I'm gonna leave that at that, because that's the premise of it. That's why you can have a whole group of people train. Some people, it just crushes them and exhausts them. Other people, it doesn't even phase them. Why is that? It's just muscle. They should all be able to handle the same thing. It's not how it works. It doesn't work that way. So that's a kind of a simple answer for something. And I don't want to negate your online trainer, but there's much more to that than just that particular statement. So I know we have a lot of questions up here. So Rachel, is there anything else that you want to talk about, like progressing and how do we progress people without burning them out, especially the woman? How do we do that? And then the training cycles that they can, is there anything else that you want to talk about, or do you want to answer questions?
Well, I think training without burnout is a very important topic to go on to. But again, that would differ with some of the questions that we've already asked. If your training age is novice, if you've only just started training and you're training 2 to 3 times a week, you're going to be able to continue that for a long time. Just as you're getting stronger, you're adapting to the movement that you're doing. But as your training age increases and your weight increases, then you will have to adjust some things as well, like take more rest days or make sure you're looking after your recovery a lot more. But exactly to what Rodney said, people respond differently to different training programs as well, but knowing how long you have been training for is a very important factor to what training program you would then be following. Just to make sure that you aren't burning out, I think another point that we should go back to is what you said about sleep. When women will work better on more towards like 7 to 8 hours minimum of sleep, and that's how you're going to be able to recover optimally to still be able to put that intensity into training. When men can have a little bit less sleep and then still be able to give that same kind of intensity. Because for us, it's it's critical to be able to regulate our hormones and just regulate our circadian rhythm to be able to adapt and recover from the stress that you've had from training, or from work or from life or anything, and to be able to promote that adaptation without fatigue.
Yeah, and so we had a question kind of around the menstrual cycles. It was from Stefan or Steven, forgive me for not knowing which one because it's pronounced differently in different areas of the world. Setting program design sets and reps around the female menstrual cycle. Is there so what's setting a program around, from a sets and reps standpoint, around a menstrual cycle? Is there like magic numbers?
I don't think there's magic numbers. It is understanding your client at the same time, because they will vary and they will differ. But recognizing the phases of the menstrual cycle is obviously important to be able to adjust load and volume and recover accordingly. If we go by, women may tolerate higher rep work and shorter rest during the follicular phase, and they may benefit from longer rest time and reduced volume during the luteal phase. But then again, that might be different to a specific, but that would be a broad range.
Correct. And I'm gonna do something for everyone on the call. I'm going to talk about something real quick, and then I'm gonna put the link in the handout section, or actually, I mean, in the question chat. So you guys will be able to see it if you look at question here in a second. When we're talking about sets and reps and programming and all that stuff, that's going to be individualized for everybody. One of the things that we have at Eleiko that we've talked about multiple times on previous webinars is our raw score. Our raw scoring system is 4 subjective boxes that we ask questions to someone. How have you slept? How does your body feel? What's your mood like? And what's your nutrition hydration like? Based on those 4 and based on research that has extensive research supporting it, that will give you an indication of someone's stress level. That's ultimately how they feel. It's a subjective measure that is backed in science, and it's actually said to be more powerful than objective measures because it's the person's feeling. And I know that doesn't set well, but I can also give you guys the link to the research. But all that said is, if you were to use this raw score, and I'll put a link in there because we have it, you can download it off our website. If you use that, you'll know where your client is in every session, whether they're male or female, whether they're in menstrual cycle or not in menstrual cycle. You'll have a gauge of where they're at, and then based on their number, the score that it gives you, you can modify the training session that you have for them. So if someone is novice, someone's intermediate, or someone is advanced, they have a different general ability level, but you have a daily ability that always changes. Your daily ability will change hour to hour for many people, depending on what's going on. So we have to train to that ability within their general ability. So you don't train someone who's a novice like someone who's an advanced, but you can train someone who's a novice or an intermediate within that ability level, have a program for them, which is going to change in volume and intensity for a lot of, especially volume for most of those. But then you can adjust the variables to match who they are right now. And that's how you decrease stress. And that's proven to show over time in research. And then I've been using it for almost 15, 18 years now with clients. And it is a life changer because you're putting the amount of stress on that client that they can handle at that point in time, not what a program says they can handle. So as we finish with this, and Rachel keeps going, I'll drop the link in the questions tab so you'll see it pop up. And that way you can go access that link and start using that. And that will handle a lot of the questions that people have. Well, how much should I do and how much should I not do? What does the client say? How do they feel? And that will cater a lot of that stuff for you. Okay, Rachel, hit it.
Yeah, I think that because there is a lot of trainers in here as well then, or men who are going to train women, it's a how do you then approach your client, or how do you approach your session at the same time? And there's different cues that would then resonate with women a lot more, which is using more positive and capability focused cues rather than something like don't let your knees cave in. We're thinking about push through the floor instead. And again, that becomes so relative to us because the don't let your knees cave in cue or push your knees out cue can sometimes push them off balance as well. And when we're looking at trying to gain more stability within the knee and the hip, that could possibly go the opposite way. So, and again, another thing, instead of things like don't round your back, show your chest to the wall or pull your chest up, pull your stomach in, gives them the positive reinforcement rather than changing to the negative.
Excellent. So what about burnout, going back to burnout where that was?
Oh, because we touched on one point, which was sleep and rest. And obviously recovery, nutrition plays a vital role for women in that. This could be a very large topic, to be honest. So I'll try and keep it briefer, but like your protein intake has to be quite great to be able to support muscle repair. Looking then at your micronutrients, your calcium, your vitamin D, your magnesium to help support bone and muscle health at the same time. And making sure you're optimally hydrated, especially if you're just starting to strength train. You need to be able to make sure your muscles aren't dehydrating. If they're dehydrated, then you could exacerbate fatigue and get cramps, which is also more common in pregnancy or postpartum phases if you're not hydrated enough. Yeah, so nutrition would be a part of being able to gain muscle mass at the same time and then not burn out, to make sure you're fueled enough.
Which why that's part of the raw score that we have.
Hmm.
Rachel, there's an intermediate female powerlifter, Yvonne, and she's, what can women expect with focus on progression and recovery during para and menopause? Is that going to be different, like more weight on the bar?
In between sets, or in general
I think
after
in
sets?
general is what the question is.
Yeah, you will probably need a little bit longer to recover, but doesn't mean you're not going to be able to react to the same stress and adapt to that. You might just need a longer recovery time, but you will still get the same adaptations. It might just take a little bit longer, because your hormones are changing as well.
Right. And I think that's really key to kind of harp on, Rachel, as we talk about this, is just because women have perimenopause, menstrual cycles, does not mean that they like shut down and they're not going to be able to do anything. And that's where I think if you're a man training a woman, you need to understand where she's at, what she's feeling. If you're a woman training a woman, you have a little bit of clue, but what you are, if you're a female trainer or coach training another female, you may not be the same. You may have a different response during those periods of time, because everyone has slightly different responses. There's some generalities. So this, again, I won't be able to overstate it enough. This is where that raw score becomes very important. Even though the raw score won't look at your hormone profile, which I would strongly suggest everyone gets to see where you're at, what are your deficiencies. But even though it doesn't do that, it takes where you're at. So that lets you know how much you should do relative to what your body is feeling like it can do. And then from there, place the right acute variables or the right amount of volume on the body so that it's able to recover properly. Because if you follow a program and don't manipulate it based on how you are feeling, you will ultimately break down. Your body will beat you. That's just how it works. That's always going to happen 100% of the time. You will break. Something will get hurt. Something will get strained. Whatever it is, you're going to end up with some type of injury on that. So that will be extremely important moving forward. Let's see if we can get just a couple more questions if you're up for it.
Yeah, I think just quickly on that as well, I think
Please.
that also depends on your training age. If you've been training for a long time and then you're going into perimenopause or menopause, then you just need to adjust the training volume, but you can still make the adaptations.
Exactly.
I think it always just goes back to understanding this and understanding the process and your own body or your client's body. It doesn't mean anything is held back. It just makes you more capable as long as you understand how to utilize it.
Exactly. I'm going to jump in real quick. Max had a question. Max, you asked a question about training a female closer to their 1RM at a higher volume than you would with a male counterpart. That should go back to your raw score, because it doesn't matter that they're female and in general they might have the ability to train at that. It's what can they do at that particular time. So we have to be very careful when we hear information about these people or this group or that group can train at this level, because that doesn't mean that that person that you're working with can do that, especially at this particular point in time. Every day your body will change. And those of you that have been training for a long period of time, I'm going on my 40 whatever year, 5th year of training. So I know when my body can and can't do something. And if I don't follow it, it's going to break. So that's what we have to be aware of. If every day your body is going to be different, you will not be the same. You will not have the same strength. You will not have the same intensity. You will not have the same mood. You will not have the same nutrition and hydration for the most part on every single day. So every day is going to have slight shifts and adjustments. That's the easiest way to counter What sets and reps should I do? Should I train this person at this intensity? You may be able to, but you have to find out what she's capable of doing instead of just jumping in and doing that. So I want to caution everybody that we're talking about there's generalities and there's different things, but we need to be more specific on a day-to-day basis, or we're going to go out and start hurting people.
Yeah, I think that was a very good, very important clarification as well. But if we then looked at a male and female who both came in and were at 100% ready to train, they've slept well, they've ate well, they're primed for the day. If they both then go to hit their 1 rep max, if we drop the weight to around 90%, then who could be able to perform more quality reps at around 90% of their weight is probably going to be the female. Like, they could hit in the rep range of 8 to 12 reps, where a man could possibly hit at 90% around 2 to 4.
And a lot of that has to do with the
100% athlete.
Yeah, and that's individuals, and a lot of that's due based on kind of an endurance factor that females have. As a general rule of thumb, there's a little bit different endurance capacity than males. That is a generalized statement, so just understand that. But in general, but not every single person is going to follow that pattern. So that's why that particular happens. I think there was a question about that earlier. I haven't gotten to every question because there's a lot of questions, which is really awesome, but we also want to be respectful of everyone's time. There was a question about how to navigate need for increased protein consumption for strength training and undesired weight gain. So if I can answer this real quick, Rachel.
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Protein won't put weight on you. It's calories, and you're going to have carbohydrates that spare the protein in order to actually gain weight. So if someone's training at a fairly high intense with strength level, you should have basically, well, 1 gram per pound or 2 grams per kilogram, or even more, 2 to 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram of weight to sustain the repair of the tissue. If you don't take in enough carbohydrates, then what's going to happen is your protein is going to be used to actually create energy for the system, which isn't the primary source of energy for the body. So you're going to use more of that protein for energy than you are for repair. So this is where the whole diet becomes, which we're not doing a nutrition thing, and at some point we will. We have a great nutritionist that we work with in our US Navy contract, and we will talk about that. But just because you add proteins to someone, so again, between 2 and 2.5, if someone's training at a high level, like for Rachel, I would say, Rachel, you should be at about 2 to 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram in order to maintain muscle tissue and to maintain the recovery process. That the protein is what repairs the tissue. But that doesn't mean she's going to gain weight. Gain weight is on calories in, calories out. And it also has to do with hormones, especially in menopause, which is why if the hormones are off, even though you're not taking in a bunch of calories, you can gain weight. So this is where it gets complicated, and that's where you need a hormone profile to find out where you're at. And again, that's not the purpose of this particular webinar. It's to give you generalizations about what we can and can't do. So there's a lot of good questions. It is now the top of the hour, and I know that our time is technically up, so we want to be very respectful of those who are on. If you want to stay on, we'll stay on another 10 minutes or so, and we can go through the questions. And Rachel, if you have time, we'll go through and answer a few more questions. I know it's late there where she's at. It's early where I'm at. If you have to get off, that's fine. We had over 180 people on, so I think that's phenomenal. So appreciate that.
Yeah, stay on.
You stay on. So here's a question from Beck Phillips. Would a good example of women being able to work at a higher relative intensity than men be that a female's 5 RM could be 90% of their 1 RM versus a male is closer to 80–85%? And I think you just answered that question, so yes. It doesn't necessarily mean they're stronger, it just means they have the ability to do more at a heavier load than males do in general.
Yes.
Would putting a deload week in when menstruating be a good option?
I wouldn't advise so. I would just advise, if you really needed to, change the load and the volume and recovery accordingly. But then if you were deloading for a whole week every month, then you're only really getting 3 training weeks if you're following a program. But we can always revert back to the raw score on how you are feeling going into your training that day, because your body is still just reacting to the stimulus that you're giving it. If that is a 7 out of 10 for that day, or that is a 10 out of 10 for that day, then that's what your body is going to react to. And the next week, even though you feel fantastic and you feel great, and you can then hit a different 8 out of 10, then you would go for it. But I wouldn't suggest to put a deload week in every month.
Here's another one from Adam Cook. Says, at what age should I consider sex-based differences in training? I train quite a few youth teams.
I think it's actually more important as they're younger, because you're developing and your muscles are changing, and you actually, there was a study that most ACL tears are in women, and at a younger age as well, because they don't have that stability in their knee. And you're probably starting to do more plyometric kind of training at a young age as well, if it's sports or performance based. Right. So I think it should be considered from the beginning.
Yeah, so here's one. Do you have experience with pregnant athletes, people who do strength training, and is there a possibility of building muscle, getting stronger through pregnancy?
Probably not getting stronger. You want to be able to maintain, but it's also, it changes. It depends if you have any issues throughout your pregnancy, or you have struggled to get pregnant as well. That would be a different topic. But if you have already been strength training leading up to your pregnancy, then it would be fine to be able to continue that. You will just be changing movement patterns as you start to go through your pregnancy as well. It's really important just to listen to your body, to what you're doing, but it's definitely a maintenance phase and not a progression phase.
Yeah, and I would pipe in and strongly suggest that when you're pregnant, you are building another human being. So your body is putting forth a lot of energy to do something completely different. So when you're pregnant, that's not the time to try to make gains. And Rachel said it perfectly, is that's a maintenance phase. You can maintain that. And I'll use the female pole vaulter that I was talking about. I trained her after she finished competing in the Olympics, and she had gotten pregnant. So she was still able to work phenomenally well, but the goal wasn't to see how much she could do, push her as hard as she can. Her goal was just to maintain. Remember, you can only advance or adapt based upon how well you recover. The workout is the stress component. The recovery is what actually dictates how much adaptation you're going to make or not make. So pregnancy is about making sure that you're not doing too much, so you're starving your body and not having enough for the kids. So well said. Good question though. How does the menstruation cycle influence a woman's strength training and performance? I don't know if we've touched on that a few times, but you can answer that if you want.
Yeah, but it's variable to everybody, I think. It's trading through your menstrual cycle, and I would really suggest having an app. If somebody doesn't have an app there, or at least tracking on your phone on how you feel throughout the month, it's really important to create that kind of awareness, so you know where you can push and where you can't. Yeah, you might be able to tolerate like higher rep work and shorter rests during your follicular phase. But again, it's just adjusting the load and volume and recovering accordingly.
All right. Excellent. Here's one relative to Eleiko and military. So I'll take this one real quick because it's a great question. Given the underrepresentation of female military personnel in research and their disproportionately higher rates of musculoskeletal injuries, does Eleiko have any special plans to specifically support female tactical populations through targeted education, research initiatives, or in-person workshops as part of a tactical training focus? So as I mentioned, we work with the United States Navy and we deliver education to them. And part of the stuff that they are working on right now, let me be very clear, the military is in charge of what the military does. So no matter how many great ideas we may have, the military is in charge of what the military does. So we don't make their decisions for them. We try to we try to fill in the gaps where we can. What we're doing is we're going to be in the process, and we have been in the process of implementing some of our recovery strategies. So recovery is the key. It's actually the readiness and recovery. That's why we have a course called Readiness and Recovery Training. Readiness is the preparation to train. Recovery is the recovery from the training, but they're intimately linked. You actually start recovering in your warm-up, whether you know it or not, because how you warm up the body will dictate how much unnecessary stress the body will receive or not receive. So what we've done is we've gone through and started formulating how things can be done and what needs to happen. Part of that is creating an activation process, like I talked about. Activation in our standards, based on Greg Roscoff's muscle activation techniques, is not did the muscle turn on, it's when did it turn on, how fast did it turn on, and was it able to support the joint? That's different. It's type 1 muscle fibers, so it's very unique. That is actually one of the key factors that has been missing in all warm-up recovery processes, because just because you can move doesn't mean that what is supposed to be turning on is actually turning on. And I can prove that to you. Matter of fact, there's YouTube links that I would love to share because I have proof of it. And depending on how, like for instance, how you foam roll, if you foam roll longer than 30 seconds, you will shut down the tissues that you just foam roll. And I can prove that. If you massage gun someone for longer than 30 seconds in one area, you will shut that tissue down. And what I mean by that is that I could put it in its in range of motion and I could muscle test it and it can't hold it. No matter how hard you try, it won't hold it. Doesn't mean you're not strong in some type of lift. It means you can't hold the joint in that position, which means that joint is not stable now. So this is why there is so many injuries, musculoskeletal injuries, and why we've done what we've done. So are we implementing things for them? Yes, those are things that we're starting to drop in. Are there things coming down the pipeline that they want us to develop to help with that? Yes, that's what's coming down the line. But just know the military is a very huge ship and you don't turn it in a week. So that's up to them. But thanks for asking. That's a great question. I'm going to leave that one. Can you? Some of these are great questions. We just won't be able to get to everything. I don't see the whole question of that. So I think we're going to leave it there because that's about 10 after. And I think that, Rachel, I think you've done a fantastic job of hitting the main things. If you guys have more questions or specific questions, or you need specific information, please feel free to reach out to Eleiko Education, and I will try to respond and or forward them to Rachel so she can respond to what you guys have. Rachel, I want to thank you. It was awesome. One, to see you again, and two, to let you do what you do best, so I can just sit here and hang out.
Always a pleasure.
I appreciate that very much. And so everyone that was on, thank you so much for your support of Eleiko Education and being here for all the first-time people. I hope this is great. Hopefully you guys got the link that I sent over to the raw score, so you can do that. If you can't, just go to eleiko.com/education and scroll down to the training tools and you'll see it in there. Rachel, the rest is yours. You can say what you want and we'll jump off.
No, just thank you everybody for joining and trying to change the world of women's strength training, just so we gain a little bit more knowledge on how you're training your clients and how you're training yourself. It can only be for the better.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Rachel. Have a great rest of your night. Appreciate it.
Good
Bye,
night,
everybody.
Oh, good day.